a land of peaceful stillness with some of the most breathtaking natural vistas of incredible beauty. There are stunning hills, towering mountains, and glittering lakes, enormous rivers and immense tea plantations, a plethora of wildlife and stunning blue skies. Malawi, known as the warm heart of Africa, is certainly deserving of this title. Malawi is a country whose people are caring, hardworking, passionate, and have an inspiring, indomitable strength of spirit. Their voices, singing hymns and chants are mesmerizing, and their warm smiles are captivating. In 2004, the Aberdeen City Presbytery and the Blantyre City Presbytery entered into a formal partnership. And in that partnership, the presbyteries and their congregations affirmed that as members of the worldwide Church of Jesus Christ, they belong together. They wished to learn from each other's experiences and diversity, and they agreed to share their understanding of the faith they hold in common and their vision for the future, so that together they may become more faithful and effective witnesses in the work of God's kingdom. In the years since the partnership was created, congregational linkages have been established and exchange visits between visitors from both countries have taken place. There is regular communication and exchange of resources, and most importantly, informed prayer with and for each other. However, the linkages between Aberdeen and Blantyre can be traced back to the 19th century, when Scottish missionaries first traveled to Malawi, introducing the country to the Christian faith.
David Livingstone is really the beginnings of the connection between Scotland and Malawi. David Livingstone was born in Lanarkshire in a small community called Blantyre. Livingstone wanted to do something more with his life. And he wasn't trained as a minister or anything like that. He actually trained to be a medic, but had a very strong faith. He was a Congregationalist. And working with the London Mission Society, he travelled huge amounts across Africa, more than anyone else really at that time. And part of his missionary journey was visiting parts of what we now know as Malawi. He did that with very much a sense of bringing Christianity, but it was also about bringing commerce, about opening up trade routes, and very much as a part of his time of bringing civilization. And a huge part of what he did was to reveal and open the African continent to folks in Europe, so that people in Europe could understand it better. And part of that, sadly, was revealing the slave trade that was still going on the East Coast with Arabian slave traders. And so that legacy is a legacy that still continues on today and is very much respected by the people within Malawi. It was the Church of Scotland that developed a mission station first in what we now know as Blantyre City, the Blantyre Mission. And as part of that, Henry Henderson and Dr. Robert Laws travelled over to Malawi. And there's a connection there with Robert Laws and Aberdeen as he grew up in the Manfield area. Would have been quite a poor area then, but he had a real love for other places and what became a real love for Africa and the people in Africa, and this zeal to want to share the love of God with these people. And so when they travelled there and they were part of setting up a new community, a new mission station there, they really developed an incredible amount in a short period of time in setting up schools and hospitals and even a law court and a jail as part of that, and building an incredible church, really the Cathedral Church of St. Michael's and All Angels, which there is nothing else like it in all of Malawi.
With these established linkages between Aberdeen and Blantyre in place, 2004 saw the beginnings of a formal partnership between the presbyteries. As part of this partnership, many ministers and congregational members have visited their partner churches in Malawi to share both experiences as well as worship. Eileen Bishop was one of the first to do so.
I came in on 2004. Alison Swindells, the Reverend Alison Swindells, had been in Africa and had been approached about the possibility of setting up a twinning. And this was, of course, a new concept in the Church of Scotland, but an exciting one, and we felt it was a possible way forward of linking ourselves with people on the ground. Alison had been a lawyer before she was a minister, so she was able to draw up the Constitution, and I more or less took over from her at that point. The first thing we did was to find out how many congregations in Aberdeen Presbytery were looking for a twinning or were wanting to get involved, and we ended up with 18. So I went out to Malawi with 4 other people in 2004 for the service of twinning and to get to know our friends over there. It was a very joyous time. We had a wonderful celebration of these new relationships and, of course, enveloped and welcomed in the traditional way that Malawians do, with love and singing and joy, and it was like that the whole way through our first visit. After that, we came back and we decided that we would have a group of Malawians come to us. You can start slowly, I suppose, and have a few people, but I decided let's go for it. And we actually had a group of about 23 come. A lot of hard work finding accommodation, setting up a programme, but it was fabulous. I'll never forget that visit. It was a lovely mixed group of people. And in actual fact, I remember that music and singing was very much part of that visit. Everywhere we went, they would sing, and that breaks down the barriers.
I've been the convener of the Aberdeen Malawi Partnership for just about 2 years now. And I remember first coming on and speaking with people about their experiences traveling to Malawi. And it really just excited me. I've always been passionate about Africa and always wanted to go, but had never had a chance to visit. And so as I heard their stories, it really meant a lot to me and got me excited. But it was still their story. It wasn't mine yet. This July, I had the wonderful chance, the privilege to travel down with a small delegation to Malawi and to meet the people, to work with them in the orphanages and the feeding stations, to fellowship with them, to preach and to teach, and to see a bit of their country. And it was such a magnificent experience for me. I think one of the reasons why is because what was previously someone else's story has now become part of my story. And so it really makes a difference.
It's very hard to match the kind of welcome that you receive in Malawi. When I got off the plane in Malawi with other people, we were greeted by about 50 Malawians who'd gathered to greet us, singing and dancing, really giving us the warmest welcome we could have hoped for. And we understood straight away why Malawi is known as the warm heart of Africa.
The first experience was quite amazing because when we arrived, we were quite tired because we'd been travelling for well over a day and we had just spent 6 hours in a rickety minibus. So when we got off and then we saw all this people standing, dancing, singing, and just welcoming us with arms open, and it was just an amazing experience, and the tiredness just lifted and we were there. We had arrived.
It seems a little bit different coming through the terminal in Aberdeen, where so many businessmen and other people travel through every day and trying to give the same sort of welcome. But in our own way, we tried to do so. We turned up at the airport, and back in the church halls anyway, I know that some of the guests have enjoyed a Scottish ceilidh while they've been here.
Do something.
The people in Malawi are just so warm and caring and giving, even if they have just a few little things. It's funny, I laugh, I actually gained weight when I went to Malawi because people everywhere you'd go, they want to feed you. And as a minister, they would hear that the minister was in town, or the abusa, as they call it. They would put out a spread. And some of these people had very little, but they would put out everything they had. And of course, you would not refuse to eat, and so you'd eat and you'd share. And of course, you had to have sima, because if you didn't eat sima, you hadn't eaten. And I packed on a few pounds, but it was wonderful.
Good job, Abusa. We had a very varied trip, so we did a lot of different things. But for me, some of the standout things, because part of the reason, a particular focus for me going was thinking about young people and youth, was visiting some of the orphanages and seeing the young people there. And we had a wonderful time with them, introducing some songs from Fishy Music and teaching those songs and getting the actions in and everyone singing away. And then, of course, having, for us, learning some of the songs in the Chichewan language too. Not ever quite sure what we were singing, but we got into it nonetheless. And these were really moments that last in my memory, because there was such a direct contact using music, that kind of language that covers any language boundaries that we might have. We were doing things together through music.
Sundays are incredibly busy in a Malawian church.
Well, you went to church service in Malawi, you went at 6:30 in the morning, and you could be there till 12 o'clock. The 6:30 to 9:30 is an English service, so that was good because you can understand it. The next one was in Chichewa, which you didn't understand, but somebody would tell you bits and pieces. The only thing you could understand was the hymns, because you knew the hymns in tune. You maybe didn't sing in the same language as they did, but you did know the hymns.
A lot of people came and went during the service. People don't always arrive at the same time, but there's a lot of participation in the service. I think we had 6 separate choirs that sang for us on that morning, involving people of all ages, people from the guild, people from the youth group, all having their own role to play in worship.
John 3, verse 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, to whoever shall believe in him should not perish, but have the everlasting life.
There was lots of children and lots of young people as well, and I was involved in, for example, a Bible study with the youth group, and I think there must have been about 30 teenagers there, so that's not something we experience in Scotland, so that was certainly different.
But the welcome also within the church that we're twinned with was very warm. And despite the language barriers and having to take services where you've got somebody who's translating and folks are laughing at times when you're thinking, why are you laughing? I didn't say anything funny there. It's a whole adventure, but one that is incredibly worthwhile.
That fits. I think that fits. How's that? You like that? Is that good? Bueno?
I saw some really hard things as well. The poverty is grinding in some places. People living in houses with dirt floors, no windows, no electricity, no running water, a few chickens in the yard, and they were doing well compared to some others. The looks of the children, their little eyes in the orphanages, with just wearing rags, some of them smelling quite bad, but they just wanted to hug, and all you wouldn't let them go. You just wanted to hug them.
When we went there the first time, there was poverty, but this time, going to see these feeding stations and the orphanage, I found it quite difficult to imagine how these children, were able to carry on with smiles on their faces.
When we first landed and we were travelling from the airport, we saw a group of children just walking along the street, and the Abusa, the minister from Malawi that was driving with us, told us that these were street children who had no homes, no parents, that probably their parents had died because of HIV/AIDS, and so they'd come to the city in hope of finding something. And there was a whole gang of children just walking along the street together. They'll be looking through rubbish, trying to find food, and you suddenly realise, as much as we think about poverty in our own country, and poverty is a big issue in our own country, there's a whole different story going on in a place like Malawi, and it is incredible how people find a way to live in this abject poverty, and it's a real challenge to us, and certainly was a challenge to me in what do we do about this sense of poverty.
When we visited an orphanage, I remember seeing a very small boy of toddler age who was sleeping in a corner, and it was explained to us that he was unwell because he was affected by malaria. And it brought home to us the inequalities between what we have and what they had. In our pockets, we were all carrying malaria tablets, which we had been prescribed before we left home from Aberdeen, in order to guard against malaria and then also to treat malaria. So we were safe, but those tablets for a fortnight's visit cost us between £50 and £60.
We went to Namatete, the feeding station there, and as one little girl, her picture will stay with me all my life. She was 5 and her name was Maria, and Peter was teaching them songs, and this little girl, a 5-year-old, she was no shoes, clothes quite raggedy, and she stood up after, one going over of the song. She stood up and sang it right through, and you just thought, what an extremely bright child. What does the future hold for her? That little girl obviously didn't speak English or very little English, but when you can see how she picked the English up, just like a drop of a hat, she was able to stand up, actions, English good, and you just say, it's our duty really to make sure that these people do have a life out of poverty, because poverty was really bad. And I think we should all take in the fact that that's, something that we could do. Everybody could give a little something to help these people. And that was my greatest memory of being there this year, was the children. The children are the future there, just the same as they're the future here, and we really have to encourage it.
Over and above sharing in friendship and fellowship, the people of Aberdeen Presbytery have facilitated and engaged in a range of support work in and around Blantyre City.
So over the year we've done fundraising for various projects. We've sent 6 boreholes out to various schools in Blantyre where there was no water at all. We've also sent out 6 containers.
We gathered goods from local congregations. That included things like bicycles and sewing machines, and we sent containers with those goods to Malawi. The sewing machines in particular were used by people to set up their own businesses so that they could earn a living.
We have seen also when they came in to help us when we had the drought, I think some years ago, within the 10 years, they helped us with some money and to buy some food, as we know that in Malawi had a problem with the maize, and they gave us money to buy the maize.
One of the most successful, I've got to say, was Life Straws. It seemed to just attract so many people. I'd heard about a life straw through a friend, so I went and I bought one. I was going out on a solo visit in 2012. So we took the life straw, which doesn't need electricity or batteries, and it filters anything that's bad in the water, 99.999%, and it can be used by a family of 5 for 3 years, because diarrhea is the biggest killer of children under 5, and it kills more children than malaria, HIV and measles combined. And to actually see a child lying, dying with diarrhea really makes you, gets to you. So we collected £12,000 and we managed to send out 500 life straws. To fundraise for that, we did a swim-a-thon. And there was one girl at Craigie Buckler Church. She actually swam over 1,000 miles, and the congregation there supported her and gave her the money. Another lady at another church, Rotherstone West, she swam for the whole month of October, even when she was in Tenerife on holiday, and she was 74 years old. So it really seemed to grab people's attention.
We need to be very straight. The container at the top, see it? It needs to be really straight.
So because it really was very successful, because I, along with a few others, went out the following year and we did a follow-up at Malawi, and we spoke to the chiefs and they were so grateful. We spoke to nurses and staff at the clinic, and we were told that since the families who received the life straws, there had been no infant deaths. And when you hear that, that is pretty tremendous. So we came back and we reported to the committee, and Reverend John Ferguson thought, if we did that again. So we opened it up this time, not just our committee and our churches, but to all presbytery churches in Aberdeen. And this time we were able to send out 7,000 life straws. The amount of times I was told, God works in wondrous ways, that we were able to have these life straws, and I helped with the distribution.
Our own congregation gave support to Kacheri Church when they were trying to provide a manse for their minister to live in, and also an extension to their church hall. They're things that we usually take for granted in this country, but until that point, Kacheri Church had always had to have its minister share its job with another post and to live somewhere else. And by contributing in our own way to the cost of building a manse, it enabled the minister full-time to be appointed to Kacheri and to live in the parish.
I think everybody on their first visit thinks, oh, this is dreadful. Oh, look at the conditions. And the conditions are awful. These poor people. But you mustn't go down the route of feeling sorry for people. I learned, you come back thinking, oh, we have to sort this. There's so much we can do. But you actually really have to step back and begin to learn to respect these people, admire them for how they cope with the problems that they're faced with. Their entrepreneurship, how they make things work for them and manage to survive. And we tend, there's no doubt about it, to think when we go to these areas that we have all the solutions to problems, and we don't. We've an awful lot to learn from them, and that's one thing I learned. I came away as I went visit on visit to really have huge admiration and respect for the Malawian people.
As the partnership has progressed and continues to grow, we must be willing to recognize difficulties and adapt to changes.
The partnership has changed in the fact that there's more communication with the people over there.
Particularly in the early years, the technology in Malawi wasn't as good as it is now. It has obviously improved in terms of internet connections and the use of computers, but in the early days it was difficult.
I think it's one thing not to get too worked up about. I think I learned certainly as I went along. You have to relax in these relationships. Take it as it comes. If you don't hear, well, it doesn't matter. It will go ahead anyway.
It still can be quite difficult today. I know there's some congregations who would like more regular correspondence and more regular updates on what's happening.
in this relationship, in this partnership, communication is paramount. And communication has even been made easier with the advent of internet. Let's continue communicating in that way. Our relationship is going to grow from strength to strength.
In terms of the future of the partnership, I think one of the needs that we need to look at is to try to ensure that when we visit one another, the visitors are more hands-on, if you like, that they're experiencing more of what actually happens in one another's congregations. Because in some ways, when I went at first, we were rather like glorified tourists, which was very nice, but nevertheless, we didn't really always get to grips with wanting to contribute our own gifts and talents to the congregations that we're partnered with. So I think that's one of the challenges that we face. Another challenge is obviously the cost of the visits, particularly from those coming from Malawi, is a lot of money for them. It's a lot of money for people here as well, but clearly more so for them in terms of funding the trips. So we need to look at that, how we're going to fund future trips. But I certainly hope that the partnership will grow and develop in new ways in the future.
The future holds much promise for the partnership. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can exercise our faith as we reach out to our brothers and sisters in Malawi. Together, we will grow as we gain invaluable insights and inspiration from those in Malawi. And as we build on the solid foundations of the partnership, together we can grow from strength to strength, walking together, trusting God to work in us and through us to build His kingdom.